The wind across the Dakota prairie carried no warning. It only tasted of dust and endings. Koda, a man his Lakota people called Akichita, warrior, but the settlers knew only as a shadow, rode towards the Brolan ranch with silver dollars heavy in his pocket. He was there for one thing, a horse, a fast, black stallion, rumored to run like the thunder, a ghost on the plains. But the Brolan ranch was silent, too silent. The air hung thick and sour, and when he stepped into the gaping, dark maw of the barn, the silver in his pocket felt cold and useless. The only sound wasn't a nicker or a whinny. It was the faint, rhythmic clink of a chain, and the smell was not of horses, but of despair. Koda did not ride like the white men, crashing through the land as if to conquer it. He moved with it. His pony, a tough-hided Mustang named Tashunka, picked its way through the brittle grass, its ears flicking, sensing the wrongness of the place before Koda even saw the sagging roofline of the Brolan barn. The ranch was set against a line of low, bruised-looking hills, miles from the main track to Deadwood. It was a place built for isolation, for things to be done unseen. Koda had heard the whispers in the settlement. Jedediah Brolan was a procurer. If you needed a horse that wasn't technically for sale, Brolan was your man. Koda needed a mount that could outrun a cavalry patrol and had the stamina of the wind itself. Brolan, it was said, had just such an animal. He dismounted, his moccasins making no sound on the packed, dry earth. The main house was dark, its windows like vacant eyes. A single, three-legged dog lay on the porch, but it didn't bark. It was dead. Flies crawled over its matted fur. A cold knot tightened in Koda's stomach. This was not the welcome of a horse trader. This was the stillness of a trap. He left Tashunka by the watering trough, its water green with algae. His hand rested on the worn grip of his hunting knife. His rifle, a Winchester 73, was in its scabbard, but the barn felt like a place for close work. "Brolan!" Koda called out, his voice clear and sharp. The only answer was the creak of the barn door, swaying on one hinge. The smell that wafted out was a foul mix. Beneath the expected notes of old hay, manure, and horse liniment, there was something else. The coppery tang of old blood. The sour scent of sickness. The human smell of unwashed bodies, and fear. Koda pushed the heavy door open. Light struggled to pierce the gloom, illuminating thick columns of dust motes. Most of the stalls were empty, their gates broken. This was not a thriving ranch. It was a place of decay. In the very back, in the largest stall, a horse stamped and snorted. Koda's eyes adjusted. It was the black stallion. A magnificent beast, all muscle and midnight hide, but its eyes were white with terror, its coat matted with sweat. It was tied with a cruel, tight rope. "Easy, Shunkawakan," Koda murmured in his own tongue. "Easy." He approached the horse, not to buy, but to soothe, and as he passed the central support beam, he heard it. Chink. Scrape. Chink. It was not the sound of a horse. It was iron on stone, and beneath it, a sound like a small, dying animal. A whimper. He followed the sound to a row of curing stalls, hidden behind a thick, stiff canvas tarp caked in filth. He stood still, listening. The whimpering stopped, replaced by a sharp, terrified intake of breath. Whoever was behind the canvas knew he was here. His knife was in his hand. He didn't call out again. He simply reached forward and ripped the canvas aside. The darkness inside the stall took a moment to resolve. But the stench hit him first, a wave of ammonia, sweat, and infection that made him recoil. And then he saw her. She was huddled in the far corner, a pale shape against the dark wood. But she wasn't just huddled. She was anchored. A heavy, rusted iron chain was bolted to the wall. The other end was locked around her throat by a thick, spiked iron collar. Her hair was a matted, filthy tangle of what might have once been blonde. Her dress was in rags, her feet bare and caked in her own filth. Her face was a map of old and new cruelties. One eye was swollen completely shut. Her lip was split. But it was her other eye, the one that was open, that held him. It was not the eye of a woman. It was the eye of a wolf in a leg-hold trap. All terror, all hatred, all madness. When she saw him, his dark braids, his Lakota features, the knife in his hand, she didn't scream. She lunged, launching herself to the full, clattering length of her chain, her hands clawed, her teeth bared in a silent, feral snarl. She hit the end of the chain with a sickening jerk that slammed her back against the wall. She slumped, choking, her good eye rolling back, before the madness seized her again. She began to crab walk backward, as far into the corner as the chain would allow, whispering one word, over and over. No. 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 Koda stood frozen. He had seen the brutality of the cavalry. He had seen the aftermath of massacres. He had never seen this. This was a different, more personal kind of hell. This was not war. This was damnation. He sheathed his knife, holding his hands up, palms out. "I am not," he began, his voice rough. "Get out," she hissed, her voice a dry rattle. "He'll see you. He'll... She broke off, a new wave of panic seizing her. "Brolan?" Koda asked. The woman just stared, her body trembling so violently the chain rattled against the wood. Koda looked at the bolt. It was thick, sunk deep into the timber. He couldn't pull it. The collar, the lock was a heavy, cruel-looking thing. He'd need a key, or a hammer and chisel. He stepped forward. The woman screamed, a raw, broken sound that echoed in the dead, silent barn. And from the barn's entrance, a voice boomed, heavy and wet. "Well now, it seems my little pet has a visitor." Koda spun. Framed in the bright, dusty doorway stood Jedediah Brolan. He was a mountain of a man, his gut straining a filthy Union suit. In one hand he held a lit lantern, though the sun was still high. In the other he held a coach gun, its twin barrels aimed squarely at Koda's chest. "You ain't here for the horse, are you, Injun?" Brolan smiled, and the dying dog on the porch suddenly made perfect, terrible sense. The silence in the barn was absolute, broken only by the stallion's nervous stomping and the woman's ragged, terrified breathing. Brolan's shadow, cast by the lantern, danced on the walls like a demon. "I came for the black," Koda said, his voice level, calm. He did not move his hands toward his knife. "I have silver." Brolan laughed, a phlegmy, choking sound. "Silver," he spat. "You think this is about silver? You walk into my barn, find my property, and you want to talk about a horse?" He took a step inside, the shotgun never wavering. "You're Koda, ain't you? The Shadow Walker. Heard of you. They say you can track a ghost across slick rock." Brolan's eyes, small and piggy, raked over the scene. "But your tracking days are done. You see, I got a problem now. You're a witness." "She's not your property," Koda said, his eyes flicking from Brolan to the woman. She had pressed herself so flat against the wall, she seemed to merge with the shadows. "Ain't she?" Brolan said, taking another step. He was enjoying this. "She's his, and he pays me well. I just keep her safe." He chuckled at his own joke. "But she's been a bad girl, tried to run, so she gets the stall." "Let her go," Koda said. It was not a request. "Let her Brolin's face contorted in mock confusion, then hardened into a mask of pure malice. "I don't think so. I think what happens is I put a load of buckshot into your gut. Then I tell Mr. Blackwell that a renegade Lakota tried to steal his prize, and I had to put him down. He'll pay me a bonus for that." The name landed in the dusty air. Cyrus Blackwell. Koda's blood ran cold. The name was poison. Blackwell wasn't just a rancher, he was an empire. He ran the Dakota and Western Rail Company. He owned the territorial politicians. He had his own private army, many of them ex-Pinkerton agents, men who operated outside any law. Cyrus Blackwell didn't just buy land, he cleansed it. And if this woman belonged to him, she was as good as dead. And so was Koda. "Blackwell," Koda repeated. "This is his." "Everything out here is his, sooner or later," Brolan sneered. "Now, on your knees. Hands behind your head, or the girl gets it first." Brolan shifted the aim of the shotgun, pointing it directly at the woman. The woman, Eliza, squeezed her eyes shut, her whole body rigid. Koda slowly, carefully, began to lower himself. His mind was racing. The shotgun had 2 barrels. Brolan was slow, overconfident. The stallion behind Koda was still stamping, wild-eyed. Now, as his knee touched the hay-strewn floor, Koda didn't kneel. He lunged, not at Brolan but sideways toward the stallion's stall. He grabbed the latch, ripped the gate open, and slapped the horse's flank with the flat of his hand. "Ha!" The black stallion, already insane with terror, exploded from the stall like a cannonball. It was 1,000 pounds of panicked muscle, and it slammed directly into Jedediah Brolan. Brolan screamed, a high-pitched shriek, as the horse hit him. The shotgun discharged, both barrels firing at once. The blast tore a massive, echoing hole in the barn roof. Hay, dust, and splinters rained down. Brolan was on the ground, the stallion trampling over him, kicking and screaming. Koda was already moving. He ran to the stall. The woman, Eliza, was cowering, her hands over her head. "The key!" Koda yelled. His pocket! She shrieked. Koda ran back. Brolan was trying to get up, his leg clearly broken, twisted at a sickening angle. He was reaching for a long-barreled Colt revolver at his hip. Koda was faster. His boot came down on Brolan's wrist, and the sound of bone snapping was as sharp as a rifle shot. Brolan howled. Koda ignored him, grabbing the man's coat, ripping his pockets open. He found a heavy, greasy ring of keys. He looked at Brolan, who was now weeping, a pathetic, blubbering wreck. "Which one?" Brolan just sobbed. Koda didn't have time. He ran back to the stall, the stallion now careening around the barn, smashing stalls. "Move," he commanded the woman. He jammed the first key into the heavy lock on her collar. It didn't turn. The second. It stuck. Eliza was trembling so hard he could barely see the lock. "Hold still," he grunted. He tried the third key. It clicked. The heavy iron collar fell away. Eliza gasped, her hands flying to her throat, which was raw and bleeding, branded by the spikes. For a second, she just knelt there, free but not comprehending it. "He's getting up!" she screamed. Koda turned. Brolan, impossibly, was dragging himself across the floor, his broken hand leaving a trail of blood. He was crawling toward the dropped shotgun. Koda didn't hesitate. He grabbed Eliza by the arm, yanking her to her feet. She was lighter than a child. Her legs buckled. I can't! You will!" He half dragged, half carried her, throwing her bodily over his shoulder in a fireman's carry. She was all sharp bones and rags. He burst out of the barn door into the blinding sunlight. Tashunka was waiting, nervous but loyal. Brolan roared from inside the barn. "You're dead! You hear me? Blackwell will skin you alive! Both of you!" Koda threw Eliza onto his horse's back. She clung to the mane, her eyes wide with the shock of the open sky. He swung up behind her, his arms circling her to grab the reins. "Where are his men?" Koda hissed, kicking Tushonka into a gallop. "Gone!" Eliza choked out, the wind ripping the words from her. "Just him. He sent them to Whiskey Creek for supplies." They were lucky. But luck in this land was a shallow creek, and it was about to run dry. As they cleared the dead ranch yard, Koda looked back. Jedediah Brolan had dragged himself to the doorway, holding his broken arm. He was raising his good hand, and in it he held his Colt revolver. Koda ducked, shielding Eliza with his own body. A shot cracked. The bullet hissed past Koda's ear, so close he felt the heat of it. "Hup!" he yelled, digging his heels in. Tushonka flattened out, an arrow fired into the vast, empty plains. They rode north, toward the jagged, protective shadows of the Black Hills. Koda didn't look back again. He didn't need to. He knew what this was. It was no longer an escape. It was a hunt. And they were the prey. They rode for hours. The sun beat down, turning the prairie into a shimmering, hazy furnace. Koda pushed Tushonka hard, but the horse was carrying double, and the woman, Eliza, was a dead weight. She had passed from terror into a state of shock, slumping against him, her breathing shallow. Koda's mind was not on the pursuit. Not yet. Brolan was crippled. He couldn't follow. But his message would. Brolan would get a horse or crawl to the nearest telegraph station. The name Cyrus Blackwell would be on the wire, and by nightfall, every bounty hunter, hired gun, and Pinkerton agent in the territory would be looking for a Lakota warrior and a stolen woman. He needed a place to hide, a place to think, a place where the white man's law and Blackwell's reach couldn't find them. He knew such a place, a maze of box canyons and old forgotten gulches that his people called Pahasapa, the Black Hills. As the sun began to bleed into the western horizon, Koda guided Tushonka into a narrow fissure in a rock wall, a crack so small it was invisible until you were upon it. They moved through a tight, winding passage for 10 minutes before it opened up into a small, hidden meadow, complete with a spring and a grove of aspens. It was a place Koda had used many times to avoid cavalry patrols. He slid off the horse and gently lowered Eliza to the ground. She collapsed onto the grass, curling into a ball, shaking uncontrollably. Her feet were cut and bleeding from the run to the horse. Koda gave Tushonka water, then brought his canteen to the woman. "Drink." She flinched when he touched her shoulder. Her good eye opened, focusing on him with painful slowness. It was still filled with terror, but the madness was receding, replaced by a profound, bone-deep exhaustion. Brolan," she whispered, her voice like dry leaves. "He is behind us," Koda said, "but his master is ahead." He knelt, uncorking the canteen. "You must drink." She let him lift her head and pour a small amount of water onto her cracked lips. She coughed, then drank more greedily. He took a strip of clean cloth from his saddlebag and, dipping it in the water, began to clean the caked blood and filth from her face. She tolerated his touch, her eyes never leaving his. "Why?" she finally rasped. "Why what?" "Why? Help me. You should have just left. Taken the horse. You're an Indian." The words were not an insult, but a statement of confusion. In her world, he was as much a monster as Brolan. Koda paused, his hand hovering over a long, dark bruise on her cheek. "No one," he said, his voice low, "deserves the chain." He finished cleaning her face. Beneath the grime, she was younger than he thought, perhaps 20, but her one open eye looked ancient. "My name is Eliza Vance. I am Koda." They sat in silence, as the sky turned a deep, star-pricked purple. The events of the day felt like a brutal dream. Brolan was... He wasn't the worst one, Eliza finally said, her voice stronger. He was just a pig. A weak, cruel pig. Cyrus Blackwell, Coda said. The name tasted like ash. You belong to him. Eliza's head snapped up. The fire returned to her eye, and for the first time, Coda saw something other than a victim. He saw rage. I never belonged to him, she hissed. I worked for him. In his office, in Cheyenne, I handled his correspondence, his ledgers. This was the twist Coda had not expected. She was not a captured settler. She was an insider. He is a snake, Coda. A monster in a fine wool suit. He smiles at governors and signs treaties, and then he destroys. He burns. He pays men to clear the land. I know what he does, Coda said. My people have seen his surveyors who carry rifles instead of maps. It's worse than that, Eliza said, leaning forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. It's not just land. He's making the war. He wants the Indian problem to explode. He's been selling rifles to both sides. Coda frowned. To the army? No, to settlers, to vigilante groups, and, she took a shaky breath, to renegades. He has men who speak the tongues, who trade new Winchester repeaters for promises of land rights. He's arming the most violent men on both sides, knowing they'll use them on each other. He wants chaos. He told me once, chaos is the forge of profit. When the smoke clears, the army will have moved in, the tribes will be crushed, the settlers will be terrified, and his Dakota and Western Rail Company will buy the entire territory for pennies on the dollar. Coda felt a cold, hard anger settle in his chest. This was Ichu was playing a game with the blood of Coda's people, and his own. You found proof, Coda stated. It was the only reason Blackwell would go to such lengths, not just to silence her, but to possess her. Eliza nodded. His private ledger. Not the one he shows his investors in New York, the real one. Names, dates, shipments of rifles, payments to men in the army, payments to a band of outlaws led by a man named Red Tomahawk, who has been raiding settlements and Lakota villages. So you ran, Coda said. I tried. Her face crumpled. I stole the ledger. I thought I could get to the U.S. Marshal in Denver. I didn't get 50 miles. His men found me, but they didn't find the ledger. Coda looked at her rags. Where is it? They brought me to Brolan. He was one of Blackwell's men from years ago. A failed Pinkerton who owed Blackwell his life. His job was to break me, to find out where I hid it. He's been trying for weeks. She touched her throat. I never told him. Where is it, Eliza? Coda asked, his voice urgent. Eliza looked at him, her one good eye probing his. She was deciding if she had just traded one monster for another. After a long moment, she reached down to her bare, blooded foot. She gripped the tattered hem of her boot, which had been torn open. But the sole was thick. She pulled at the inner sole, wincing as it tore her broken nails. It came loose. Tucked underneath, wrapped in oilcloth, was a thin, folded book. No bigger than a man's palm. She held it out to him. This, she whispered, is Cyrus Blackwell's soul. And it's enough to hang him. Coda took the book. It was light in his hand, but it felt as heavy as a cannon. He had ridden to Brolan's to buy a horse, and had instead stumbled into the very heart of the war for the West. As if summoned by the thought, a sound echoed from the rocks far back at the canyon entrance. It was the call of a night owl. Coda was on his feet in an instant, his knife in his hand. Eliza looked at him, confused. It's just an owl." "No," Coda said, his body tense. "That is no owl I have ever heard. That is a signal." He grabbed his rifle. "They're not waiting for the telegraph. They're already here." Another call, closer this time. "Who?" Eliza breathed, scrambling to her feet. "Blackwell's best," Coda said, his eyes scanning the rim of the canyon, now black against the stars. "A man who can track a ghost across slick rock. A man I have met before. His name is Silas Croft. And he never stops." Silas Whisper Croft. The name was known in every saloon and army fort, from Laramie to Bismarck. They said he was part Comanche, part Irish. They said he could smell a man's fear from a mile away. Coda knew only one thing for certain. Croft worked for the highest bidder, and Cyrus Blackwell paid in gold. "Stay here," Coda ordered Eliza. "Do not move. Do not make a sound." He left her in the aspen grove, a pale ghost against the white bark. He moved like smoke, climbing the canyon wall, his moccasins finding silent holds in the rock. He reached the rim and lay flat, peering over the edge. The prairie was a sea of blackness. But Croft wasn't out there. He was in the maze. Coda could feel him. He heard a pebble skip, far to his left, down at the canyon entrance. They weren't coming in. They were sealing it. Coda slithered back from the edge. He had to assume there was more than one. Croft was methodical. He'd have men. He dropped back to the canyon floor. Eliza was where he left her, her hands pressed to her mouth. "They are in the passes," Coda whispered. "They know we are in this maze. They will wait for the sun." "Wait?" Eliza said, her voice shaking. "We're trapped?" "They think we are," Coda said. His mind was working, piecing together the land, the enemy. "This canyon has one entrance, but many smokes. What does that mean?" "Small cracks, chimneys, places a man can climb, but not a horse." He looked at Tashunka, who was grazing peacefully by the spring. "We have to leave the horse." Eliza looked devastated. The horse was their speed, their only chance. "And we have to leave now," Coda said, "before they set their final snares." He grabbed his saddlebag, pulling out his canteen, a length of dried meat, and his extra cartridges. He handed the food to Eliza. "Eat. You will need your strength." He tied Tashunka to a tree, giving the horse a final, soft pat on the neck. "Go free, my friend," he murmured in Lakota. It pained him, but a horse was a liability in the rocks. He turned to Eliza. "Stay behind me. Step where I step. Do not grab the rock unless I tell you. Understand?" She nodded, her jaw set. The terror was still there, but the rage was fueling it, turning it into a brittle, desperate courage. Coda led her to the back of the canyon, to a place where a rock slide had created a jumble of massive boulders. To the naked eye, it was a dead end. But Coda knew the land. He slipped between two stones that looked too close to pass, and Eliza followed. They were in a chimney, a vertical crack just wide enough for a man's shoulders. Above, a sliver of starry sky. "We climb," Coda said. For the next hour, they ascended. It was a grueling, painful ordeal. Coda, all muscle and tendon, moved with a climber's grace. Eliza was weak, her body a symphony of pain. Her bare feet were agony on the sharp stone. Her hands, raw from the chains, were scraped and bleeding. Twice she slipped. Twice Coda caught her, his grip like iron, hauling her up. He never spoke, never offered encouragement. He just climbed, his focus absolute, and willed her to follow. Finally, gasping, they pulled themselves over the top. They were on the high mesa, a flat, wind-scoured expanse of rock and juniper. They were out of the trap. Eliza collapsed, sobbing quietly, her body shuddering. Coda let her rest for a minute, scanning their back trail. Nothing. He looked east. The sky was beginning to pale, a faint grey line on the horizon. Dawn. "We must go," he said. "Where?" she wept. "Where can we go? They have horses. We have nothing." "We have the ledger," Coda said, "and I have a friend, a man who owes me." "A white man?" "A Wasichu, yes," Coda said. "He lives in the hills, a prospector. He is not like the others." He pulled her to her feet. "His name is Obadiah Miller. The miners call him Grizz, and if we can reach him, he has something we need even more than horses. He has dynamite." They began the trek. It was miles across brutal, unforgiving terrain. Every step was misery for Eliza. But Coda did not slow. He knew Silas Croft. As the sun's first rays hit the high peaks, Coda stopped. He held up a hand. "What is it?" Eliza whispered. Coda pointed, not back the way they came, but to the north, along a parallel ridge. A single rider sat on a horse, silhouetted against the rising sun. He was too far to see clearly, but Coda didn't need to. The man was staring right at them. He had anticipated Coda's move. He had known Coda would seek the high ground. The rider, Silas Croft, slowly raised a hand and waved. It was not a greeting. It was a promise. The hunt was on. He's just one man," Eliza said, her voice small. "He is never just one man," Coda said, pushing her forward. "Run!" They ran. They scrambled down scree slopes, pushed through thorny thickets, and waded through ice-cold mountain streams to hide their trail. Coda was a master of this, but Croft was his equal. Coda could feel him. Croft wasn't pushing them. He was herding them. He was driving them away from the settlements, away from any chance of help, deeper into the desolate high country. Eliza was failing. Her feet were a bloody ruin. She had stumbled and fallen a dozen times, her stolen strength depleted. She was running on nothing but the memory of that chain. "I can't! Coda, I can't!" she finally gasped, collapsing against a pine tree. "You go. Take the book. Leave me." Coda grabbed her, his fingers biting into her arm. He hauled her up, his face inches from hers. His black eyes were not angry. They were as cold and hard as obsidian. "He will not take you," Coda said. "Not again. You are not a victim. You are a warrior. A warrior doesn't quit. She fights. Now, fight." The word warrior struck her. It was the last thing she'd ever considered herself. But looking at the Lakota warrior before her, something in her broken spirit responded. The spark of rage she'd felt in the canyon flared. She straightened, wincing as she put weight on her feet. "Where?" she said, her voice raw. "This way, through the pass," Coda said, pointing. They moved on, slower, but with a new, grim determination. They were a strange pair, the silent, gliding warrior and the broken, limping Clark. By midday they reached the place Coda was seeking. It was a scar in the mountainside, the tailings of an old, failed mine. A small, ramshackle cabin, built of scavenged logs and mud, sat perched precariously over a gorge. A thin curl of smoke rose from its chimney. As they approached, a voice like rocks in a tumbler echoed from the shadows of the porch. "That's close enough, Coda. Unless you've suddenly taken a liking to rock salt." An old man emerged, his beard a wild, grizzled mass. He was dressed in rags that barely clung to his wiry frame. In his hands, he held a massive, long-barreled shotgun. This was Obadiah Grizz Miller. "I am not here for trouble, old man," Coda called out. "The hell you ain't," Grizz spat, gesturing with the shotgun at Eliza. "You're covered in trouble. Who's she? And who's that fella I seen glassing you from the ridge?" "He's the trouble," Coda said, stepping into the small clearing. "A man named Silas Croft." Grizz's one good eye widened. "Croft? The Pinkerton ghoul?" Sweet mother of... You're baiting a grizzly, son. What in God's name did you do? We have something that belongs to Cyrus Blackwell, Coda said. The old man's face, already dark with sun and dirt, seemed to darken further. He hated Blackwell. Blackwell's mining interests had run every independent prospector, including Grizz, out of the hills. Blackwell, Grizz growled. He looked from Coda to Eliza, taking in her bare feet, her rags, the raw marks on her throat. He lowered the shotgun. Get inside, he grumbled. Both of you, before Croft decides to take a pot shot. The cabin was one room, crammed with mining tools, crates, and the sharp, chemical smell of blasting powder. Grizz shoved a stool toward Eliza. Sit, girl. You look like you've been chewed up and spat out. He tossed Coda a piece of cloth. Your friend on the ridge ain't alone. Saw 2 others, flanking south. I know, Coda said. He looked at Eliza. Eliza, show him. Eliza, shaking, fumbled in her rags and produced the oilcloth-wrapped ledger. She handed it to Grizz. The old prospector unwrapped it. He couldn't read well, but he could read numbers and names. He traced a line with a dirty finger. Winchester. 73. 100 units. Payment. Red Tomahawk. His head snapped up. Red Tomahawk, that crazy bastard. He's the one who burned the settlement at French Creek. Killed my friend, Elias. Blackwell is paying him to do it, Eliza said, her voice gaining strength. He's paying everyone. He's starting a war. Grizz slammed the little book down on the table. His face was purple with rage. That snake oil-selling son of a... He paced the tiny cabin, kicking a crate. He's going to burn the whole territory down. He is, Coda said, unless we stop him. Grizz stopped pacing. He looked at Coda. And how do you plan on doing that, warrior? There's 3 of them out there, at least. And they're professionals. We're 2 men and a half dead, girl. I'm not half dead, Eliza said, pushing herself up from the stool. Her eyes were burning. And I'm not a girl. I am the woman who is going to put a noose around Cyrus Blackwell's neck. Grizz stared at her, then let out a sharp bark of a laugh. Well, I'll be damned. Got some iron in her, after all. He rubbed his beard. All right. So we fight. He turned to Coda. What's the plan, Shadow Walker? You're the one Croft is hunting. Coda unslung his rifle. Croft thinks he's herding me. He thinks I'm running. But he's not herding me. I'm luring him. He walked to the cabin door and looked out, down into the gorge below. He wants the ledger. He'll do anything to get it. He will come to us. And when he does? Grizz asked. Coda looked at the crates stacked in the corner, the ones marked with a red warning. You told me once that dynamite speaks all languages. Grizz's face split into a terrifying, gap-toothed grin. That it does, boy. That it does. And I happen to be fluent. The gorge below Grizz's cabin was called Devil's Tooth by the miners. It was a narrow, treacherous path, the only way to the cabin by horse. The rock walls were sheer, unstable. Coda knew Croft wouldn't risk coming on foot from the high mesa. He'd want to bring his horses to run them down. He would push his men through the gorge. He'll send 1 man first, Coda explained, his voice low, intense. They were huddled inside the cabin, the sun now past its zenith. A scout, to draw our fire. Silas will be in the middle, with the 3rd man covering their retreat. So we take the scout? Grizz asked, expertly taping 3 sticks of dynamite together. No, Coda said. We let the scout pass. We let all of them in. The trap is not at the entrance. It's in the middle. He pointed to a narrow bend in the gorge, directly below the cabin. There, where the rock overhangs. A deadfall, Grizz cackled. You're a mean one, Coda. Eliza, Coda said, turning to her. Grizz had given her a pair of old, oversized boots and wrapped her feet. "Your fight is not down there. It's up here." He handed her his Winchester rifle. She looked at it, terrified. I've never—" "You hold it. You point it at the trail. If anyone tries to climb this path to the cabin, you pull the trigger. You do not wait. You do not warn. You pull it until it is empty. Can you do that?" Eliza looked at the rifle, then at the marks on her throat, still visible. She remembered the chain. She remembered Brolan's laugh. She took the rifle, her knuckles white. "Yes, good. "'Kay," Coda said. He and Grizz gathered the explosives. They left the cabin, scrambling down a hidden goat path to the gorge. They worked quickly, planting the charges under the overhang, burying the long fuse in the scree. "This'll do more than stop 'em," Grizz said, patting the dynamite. "This'll bury 'em." "That's the plan," Coda said. He looked at the old man. "I need you back at the cabin, with the fuse." "What about you?" "Silas is mine," Coda said. "He is too smart for just a trap. He will find a way out. I will be waiting for him." Grizz nodded. "Don't get yourself killed, son." "You either, old man." Grizz scrambled back up the path, leaving Coda alone in the gorge. Coda didn't hide. He moved 50 yards down from the charges and stepped into the middle of the path. He checked his knife. He checked the 6 rounds in his own revolver, a battered Colt Peacemaker he'd taken off a dead soldier years ago. And then he waited. An hour passed. The silence was heavy, hot. Then the sound of a single horse, walking slow. A man appeared around the bend, a hired gun, his face hard, his rifle across his lap. He saw Coda instantly and reined in. He didn't shoot. He just looked at Coda, then back over his shoulder. "Croft! He's here! He's just standing here!" A second rider appeared. Silas Croft. He was nothing like Brolan. He was lean, dressed in practical buckskins, his face sharp and intelligent. He looked like a hawk, and he too just watched Coda. A third man appeared, positioning himself at the back. "Coda!" Silas Croft called out, his voice smooth, reasonable. "This is a long way from home for you." "So it is for you," Coda replied. "This doesn't concern you," Croft said. "This is business. Give me the woman and the book, and Mr. Blackwell will forget your part in this. He'll even pay you for your trouble." "I'm not for sale," Coda said. "Everyone's for sale, Coda. You, of all people, should know that." Croft's eyes flicked up, past Coda, towards the overhang. He was reading the land, just as Coda had. "You're alone. She's broken. This is a dead end. Don't make it a grave." "She is not broken," Coda said, "and this is not my grave." Croft's eyes narrowed. He had seen something. A glint of sunlight off the rifle barrel, high above. A misplaced rock. "It's a trap," Croft said, his voice dropping. "Bert, get back!" But Coda was already moving. He fired his revolver into the air. "Now! Grizz!" High above, Grizz lit the fuse. It sputtered, a snake of white smoke zipping down the rock face. Croft's men panicked. "It's a fuse! Ride!" The scout, Bert, yelled, wheeling his horse. Boom! The world exploded. The ground beneath their feet heaved. The entire overhang, tons of rock and dirt, detached from the cliff face. It fell with a deafening roar, a cloud of dust and death. The lead rider, Bert, was swallowed instantly. His horse, his man, just gone. The third man, the rear guard, was thrown from his horse, his body crushed by the edge of the rock slide. The dust was so thick Coda couldn't see. He covered his face, tasting grit. Horses screamed. When the air cleared, the gorge was gone. It was replaced by a mountain of rubble, 20 feet high. The path was completely, utterly blocked. But Croft was not there. Coda spun. The The rocks on the other side of the blast. A shape was moving. Croft had anticipated the blast. The moment Coda yelled, Croft had jumped from his horse, scrambling for cover in an alcove just outside the blast radius. He was alive, and he was furious. He emerged from the dust, his rifle in his hand. He didn't have a shot. Coda was behind the new rock slide. "You're smart, Lakota!" Croft screamed, his voice raw with dust. "But you're still just a savage. You buried yourself. You have no way out." Coda heard a sound from above. A shot. Crack! Eliza. She was firing the Winchester from the cabin, laying down cover fire. A bullet whined off the rock near Croft's head, forcing him to duck. "You brought a friend!" Croft yelled, but he was already moving, running back the way he came, out of the gorge. Coda knew what he was doing. Croft was running for the high ground. He was going to circle back, climb the mesa, and come for the cabin. Come for Eliza. Coda looked at the pile of rubble. It was impossible. He couldn't go back through the gorge. He had to climb. He found a handhold on the sheer cliff face and began to ascend. It was a race now, a race to the top, a race for Eliza's life. Coda climbed, his fingers and toes finding purchase in cracks no wider than his knife. Below him, the dust settled on the graves of Croft's men. Above, the sky was a perfect, unforgiving blue. He heard another shot from the cabin. Eliza, firing blindly, trying to keep Croft pinned. He hauled himself over the lip of the gorge, gasping. He was back on the path to the cabin. He ran. He burst into the clearing. "Eliza!" She was there, at the window, the Winchester's barrel smoking. She spun, wild-eyed, and almost shot him. "Coda, he's coming! I saw him! Down the ridge!" "Grizz!" Coda yelled. The old man was by the back wall, coughing. The blast had shaken the cabin, and a beam had fallen, pinning his leg. "I'm all right, boy," Grizz spat, trying to push the heavy log. "Just stuck. Get the girl, get out of here." Coda ran to him, lifting off the beam. Grizz's leg was bent, but he grit his teeth and stood, leaning on his shotgun. "Damn it, he's coming round the back. The high trail." "I know," Coda said. "You and Eliza, bar the door. Don't let him in." "What about you?" Eliza cried. "I am a tracker," Coda said. "I do not wait for the wolf to come to my fire. I meet him in the shadows." He slipped out the back door of the cabin, a small exit Grizz used for his rubbish pile. He melted into the juniper trees, circling wide, moving to intercept Croft on the high trail. He found the trail, a narrow ribbon of dirt on the edge of the mountain, and he waited. Minutes passed. Then he heard him. The soft scrape of a boot on stone. Croft was moving fast, his rifle ready. He was focused on the cabin, expecting an ambush from the front. He wasn't expecting the shadow on his flank. Coda let him pass. When Croft's back was to him, Coda stepped onto the path. "Silas!" Croft spun, a blur of motion, firing his rifle from the hip. But Coda was already gone, diving behind a boulder. The shot echoed, deafening. "Come out and die, Coda!" Croft yelled, taking cover himself. "This is not my fight, Silas," Coda called out, his voice calm. "It's not yours either. Blackwell is poison." "Blackwell pays!" Croft yelled back. He fired again. "He pays more for you dead than alive, and he wants the woman." A third shot, then a fourth. Croft was trying to pin him. Coda was calculating. Croft had a rifle. Coda had a revolver and a knife. In the open, he was outgunned. He had to change the terrain. Coda broke cover, running away from the cabin toward the sheerest part of the cliff. Croft, surprised, followed. "You can't run, Coda!" Coda ran until he reached a chimney, a crack in the rock, and scrambled up. Croft was right behind him. This was Coda's world now, a world of close quarters, of high ledges and sudden drops. He reached a small, flat-topped pinnacle. A dead end. Below, the gorge fell away 1,000 feet. Croft appeared at the other end of the narrow rock bridge. He smiled. "No more shadows, Coda. Just you and me. Give me the book." "It's not here," Coda said. Then the woman. "She knows what's in it. She'll do." Croft raised his rifle. Coda threw his knife. It was a desperate, long shot. Croft, surprised, jerked to the side. The knife missed, clattering on the rock. But it was the opening Coda needed. He charged. He crossed the 10 feet between them before Croft could re-aim. He slammed into the tracker, his shoulder hitting Croft's chest. The rifle fired, the bullet going wild, and then the gun was gone, tumbling over the edge. They were just 2 men on a precipice. Croft was strong. He grunted, driving a fist into Coda's gut. Coda staggered, but his hand found Croft's throat. They wrestled, a desperate, silent dance of death. They spun, grappling, their boots inches from the void. Croft broke Coda's grip, landing a brutal blow to his temple. Coda's vision swam. Croft grabbed him, trying to lift him, to throw him over. "You lose, savage," Croft hissed. Coda, his senses reeling, did the last thing Croft expected. He fell. He went limp, all his weight dropping, pulling Croft down with him. They both fell to the rocky ground. Coda was faster. He rolled, grabbing his knife, which had landed nearby. Croft scrambled for his own, a long, thin blade. Croft lunged. Coda met him. It was not a fight. It was a butchering. Coda was a master with the blade. He moved inside Croft's reach, his arm a blur, a block, a twist, a thrust. Silas Croft looked down. Coda's knife was buried to the hilt in his chest. He looked up at Coda, his eyes wide with a final, terminal surprise. "He pays!" Croft gurgled, blood on his lips. He slumped forward. Coda caught him, laying him gently on the rock. He closed the man's eyes. "No one pays for this," he whispered. He was wounded, a gash on his arm, a deep bruise on his ribs. But he was alive. He walked back to the cabin. Eliza and Grizz were outside, their faces pale. "It's done," Coda said. Eliza ran to him, and for the first time she touched him, not in fear, but in something else. Gratitude. Alliance. She grabbed his arm. "You're bleeding." "It is nothing." "Thank you," she whispered, and this time there were tears in her one good eye. But they were not tears of fear. "What now?" Grizz asked, leaning on his shotgun. "Blackwell ain't gonna stop. He'll send an army next time." "He won't have time," Eliza said. The fire was back, a roaring furnace. She picked up the small ledger from the cabin floor. "You," she said to Coda, "you saved my life. You, Grizz, you gave me a fortress." She looked at the book. "Now, I'm going to use this, and I'm going to burn his empire to the ground." Coda watched her. The woman he'd found chained in the dark was gone. In her place was an avenger. "You can't go to the marshals," Coda said. "Blackwell owns them." "I'm not going to the marshals," Eliza said, a cold smile touching her lips. "I'm going to the press. I used to handle Blackwell's clippings. There's a journalist in Cheyenne, a man named Mr. Creel at the Cheyenne Daily Leader. He hates Blackwell. He's never had proof." She held up the ledger. "I'm taking him his proof." Grizz limped over. "Cheyenne's a long walk, girl, and you ain't got a horse." "Tashanka," Coda said. He let out a low, piercing whistle, a sound that mimicked the red-tailed hawk. They waited. For a minute there was nothing. Then, from the canyon maze, came an answering nicker. A few minutes later, Coda's loyal Mustang appeared, picking his way through the low trail, having found his way out of the maze. Coda nodded. "He will take you." He tended his horse, and Grizz gave Eliza a canteen, a hat, and a small ivory-handled Derringer pistol, just in case. the old man growled. Eliza turned to Coda. She had no words. She simply put her hand on her heart and then on his, a gesture of thanks that needed no translation. She mounted Tashunka. She looked for a moment like a queen on a throne. "Ride east," Coda said. "Do not stop. Do not trust anyone. Give him the ledger." "Coda," she started. "What will you do?" Coda looked at the Black Hills, his home now poisoned by Blackwell's ambition. He looked at the grave of Silas Croft and the buried gorge. "My people are in danger. Blackwell's war is coming," he said. "I ride to warn them. I ride to fight." Eliza Vance nodded. A warrior to a warrior. She kicked Tashunka, and the horse, sensing the urgency, broke into a run, carrying her east toward the rising sun and a new kind of war. Coda watched her until she was a speck of dust. He turned, his arm bleeding, his body aching, and began to walk west toward the heart of the Pahasapa. The man who had walked into a barn to buy a horse had instead found a purpose, and the West would never be the same. Coda watched the dust of her departure settle, a new, hard line drawn on the horizon. The Black Hills were quiet once more, but they were not the same. A ledger full of lies was on its way to Cheyenne, and a baron's empire, built on blood and rifles, was about to face a reckoning. The Lakota warrior had sought a horse, but found a war, and a woman who, after being chained in darkness, learned to forge her own weapons in the light. Their stories are etched into those canyons now, a testament to the fact that even in the most lawless of times, true courage can't be bought, and it can never be broken. If this tale of grit, betrayal, and frontier justice gripped your soul, honor their fight. Hit that like button. Share this story with someone who needs to hear a tale of true resilience, and subscribe to our channel for more tales from the untamed, unforgiving West. And let us know in the comments, what part of Coda's and Eliza's journey truly hooked you? We read everyone.